Sometimes when you're using the if function, you may need to check on multiple criteria before deciding different results. Let's imagine in this worksheet called Compound If, we're about to check to see if a job rating is greater than 4 or 5 and a status is full-time. Now, you can use a function called AND. Sometimes it's a standalone function. Here's how it might work that way. Equal AND, left parenthesis. I want to check to see if someone's status, for example, in the cell right here, equals full-time. When you're checking for text entries, we use double quotes to embed the text. Now, the spacing is absolutely critical. Oddly enough, the upper lowercase isn't, although why not use upper lowercase as we see it here? But it's the space that's most critical, since full-time, as we see it in column H, does have a space between full and time. We want to check to see if this is true, comma, and if cell J2 is greater than 3. And we could have other criteria in here as well. The AND function can be followed by not just 2, but many, many. When both of these are true, I'll simply press Control Return. It will say true or false. In this case, true. I'll double-click, copy these down the column. And we're seeing the use of the AND function here. I'll press Control U to simply expose the content of the function. And a simple little test. It's either true or false. And sometimes that's appropriate use just as we see it. But we can also use this in an if function. And we'd like to check and say, in effect, when this is true, in other words, when both of these are true, and only when both are true, let's give these people $3,000. So if both of these are true, comma, our answer is going to be 3,000. Otherwise, nothing. Blank, double quote, another right parenthesis needed here. Since all the cells are highlighted, instead of pressing return, I'll just press Control Return, and we'll have answers for every one of these. And when do we see the 3,000? Only when the status is full-time and the job rating happens to be 4 or 5. Doesn't happen anywhere else. As we move up and down our list, it's not happening that often. And once again, that's the way the function looks here. Now, there's a companion function here called OR, and they're very similar, but obviously different. Keep in mind here, too, as we look at this, there are actually 4 possibilities here. This could be true, and this could be true. Now, that's the only time 3,000 is going to be the answer. If this happens to be true, but this is false, and we see that, for example, down in row 10 and 11, then the answer is blank or null. So only when both are true. So true, true, or true, false, false, true, or false, false. Four different possibilities. Only when both of them are true is 3,000 going to be the answer. Now, the companion function to AND is called OR. And just as the words have a meaning in English, they have that similar meaning here. If either one of these is true, now out of our 4 possibilities, all but one of them is going to be getting $3,000. So only when both of these are false, false, do we get blank. Everything else is going to be 3,000. And as I press Control Return here to change all of these, a lot more 3,000s appear. So sometimes we use AND, sometimes we use OR. And we're not restricted to just 2 entries. I mentioned earlier there could be many, many here. It's well over 30 here. Lots of different conditions. So that's why we're not using the word or in the previous case, the word and, repeatedly between the different conditions that we might have in here. We use a comma, and the word is outside of the parentheses. So by implication, read the word or as you're looking at these, between the conditions that we have here. Now, there could be times when you use and or together. It's unlikely, but there certainly will be some times. And maybe this company changes its mind about bonuses and says the following. Okay, we will give you a bonus automatically if your job rating is greater than 3. So I'm going to change this a little bit by taking this text here, removing it with Command X, that's a cut, and I'll put it right after the or, Command V, and a comma. So here's what we're about to say. You will get a bonus if you've got a good job rating. That's automatic. No other questions asked. Or you might have a combination of other criteria, namely, and here we'll use the word and, when your status is full-time, comma, and your years of service, that's over in cell G2 here, if that's greater than 9. So we've got an and inside of an or. So if these 2 conditions are true, you will get the bonus. If this condition is true, you will get the bonus. Some people might have all conditions true. It makes no difference. As long as you've got either this one or the combination of these two, you're going to get the bonus. So I'll press Control Return here and recopy by double-clicking the lower right-hand corner. So, example here. In row 10, that person does not have a good job rating, but he or she does have the combination of being full-time and the years of service are 13. That's certainly greater than 9. Therefore, that person gets the bonus. So you see what's happening here. These are certainly tricky at first, but the more you work with them, the easier they fall into place. I strongly recommend zoom in. You want these large and clear on your screen. If you're doing editing up in the formula bar, which is certainly okay, and you can do that, from time to time, it gets a little tight. And if you're using more extended nesting here of ands and ors, the commas and the parentheses sometimes are not as clear as you might want them to be. But when you're doing the editing right in the cell, after you've zoomed in, sometimes these are going to be easier to read. Now, there's a third kind of function you might use from time to time. It's the word not. And nearly always, it's going to work better if you don't use the function. How about this little scenario that says, okay, we only give bonuses to full-time people. You could say, since a large number of people here are not full-time, let's cover that one first. So let's get rid of this function here and start over. Equal if, and imagine a scenario where many of the status entries are not full-time. We could start with the word not. Now, I stress, most of the time, I think not is probably not the best choice, but we can use it here. When it's not the case that the status is full-time, H2 equals, double quote full-time. When that's not true, comma, the answer is 0. When it is true, let's make a test to see if the job rating is greater than 3, comma. If it is, the answer is going to be 3,000. But if it is not, double quote, in other words, empty cell. So a nested if, two ifs, but we're using the function not. So based on context, this will work. I'll complete the entry, recopy it down the column, and once again, exposing this with Control U, we see the use of the not function here. So whenever someone is not full-time, automatically 0 for the bonus. But if the person is full-time, then we consider the other option. Now, if we had a situation where maybe only a quarter of the entries were full-time, there is a little bit of logic here that says this is better because this covers most cases. In other words, the other calculation won't be used very often because this is going to be true much of the time. In other words, most of the people are not full-time. But I think anytime you're using a negative entry with the word not here, it makes it a little bit harder to explain, a little bit harder to think out. And yet from time to time, you will see its usefulness. Now, earlier in this movie, we saw how to use the and function and the or function, more likely to be used and sometimes in combination, but powerful ways to set up multiple criteria when using the if function.